if people can just read that.
So will the some councillors be defined? Yeah.
Well, what, sorry? Yes, so some councillors, so Councillor O'Leary, Councillor McPherson and the Deputy Mayor will be those people, if that's all right with everyone.
Yeah.
So the idea being a smaller group, give the feedback, and if you personally as a councillor have some feedback that you didn't articulate, you need to talk to them and give it to them. And if we can't sign it off next week, I mean, how many hashes do we have to have at this, really?
I'll second it.
Yes, so are you all right with that?
Yep.
Okay, so that's now the motion. That's I moved and the Deputy Mayor seconded.
If we can, yeah. If we can't.
Okay.
Can I put up an amendment?
Yes, certainly. And what would that be?
That's, we wait for the seismic report before making any further decisions.
So would that be the report be received and B,
That's correct.
that council delay approval of
No.
the... Just...
That we wait for the seismic report before we make any further decisions.
Okay. Have you got that? Okay. I'd like to put that up. Is there a second? Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Mallett is seconding.
Can I ask a question of the CEO or the General Manager in relation to the seismic report? What's the latest ETA best guess on that?
Look, as said earlier on, end of June is our scheduled target, but I am pushing if we can get something sooner. But I was reminded earlier this week that the more I ring up, the more I take up his time. So.
Text them.
Yeah.
Just through the, I mean, I realise engineers don't want to sort of give you the report more or less till it's final. To what degree are they prepared to give us an indicative progress, if required?
They will give us a indicative indication once they've finished their desktop work that they're doing now, which then leads, as I said before, to work out how they undertake the invasive testing, and they'll let us know how it's looking at that point in time. They will always prepare a draft report for our consideration.
Sure.
And before it is made final, and we wanted to move very fast on that as soon as we can. As soon as we get a report out, we'll want to get the outcome.
That'll be made available in terms of the submissions. Thank you.
You ever noticed that?
Does that record what you wanted, Councillor King?
Thank you.
Okay. Could you just flick it back up to the motion again, just when you finished that? That's fine. I think you just better change D to saying the engagement document rather than consultation document. The engagement document, next line down, that's it. Okay, so are people clear that's the motion, and then we'll go down and look at the amendment because that'll be the first one. The councillor's happy to speak to both rather than taking them separately? Yes?
Can I ask a question about the motion?
Yes.
So are you instructing staff to go ahead and book advertising space ahead of the final decision
I don't think
by this motion going through?
I don't think that's contemplated because you'll see by D that if, for example, if the engagement document is signed off and approved next week on Tuesday, the legal requirement is a minimum of 4 weeks consultation. So that gives a fair amount of time, doesn't it, for them then to go through the normal processes of booking whatever they need to after that date.
So no space is going to be booked anywhere?
I can't answer that,
Or
Councillor.
can somebody answer that for me?
So given that motion, we would not. we would hold off. So we wouldn't confirm any, commit to any bookings until the document was signed off.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you want to go down to the amendment as well, can you put them both on one page? That might be helpful. Okay. All right, so I've moved the motion, so I'll just speak very briefly. I think, number one, it's very important that the engagement document contains the information that adequately informs the public about what this issue is about, how it arose, and what the options are and consequences of those options for people to choose. And that's why I have no problem in continuing to work on the document, because I think that's very important. I'm less concerned about design, I'm more concerned about content, but one thing I will say is design does impact on the way people read and interpret a document. And for me, it's really important that the information, the issues about what is the issue with founders is clearly articulated, and the options and the distinction between the options is clearly articulated and in language that's easy to understand. And importantly, people understand what the finances are and what impact those might have. So I think all those things are really important. I'm not fussed if it's 4 pages or 8, but I do think what's been presented is underdone. So I'm looking for something that's got a lot more meat in it. And bearing in mind that we've been a little bit knee-deep in this, so we probably know a lot more, well, we do know a lot more than the person in the street. And so we need to make sure that they are brought up to speed as well. One of the things that, for me, that's really important about the timing of this is that when a big issue like this arises and the community are already debating it and are already talking everywhere about it, it would be, in my view, quite wrong for us not to respond to the community discussion in a timely way. We tend to work slowly in this building, and in some cases that's appropriate. But also our job is to respond in a timely manner to conversations and discussions that matter to the community, and this one absolutely does. The other point I'd make is that I'm very pleased to see that part of the engagement process will involve Creative Waikato and the Arts Forum being involved in this, because those are the people that we say have got the knowledge and expertise to lead some of these discussions and give us the information, help us with the information that we need. And I'm really pleased that particularly Creative Waikato, and I acknowledge you, Sarah, in the public gallery, have come on board about that. Thank you very much for that, because I think that's one way of making sure that we're at arm's length with what people have got to say, and we get that information. And that doesn't stop people from having their own views separately. And I think that's important as well. Look, I think the survey, I'm very keen on the survey, but, you know, surveys can be two-edged swords. They've got to be short and pithy. No one wants to hang on the phone for 15 minutes answering a whole pile of irrelevant questions. But I will be particularly interested to see what people outside the city boundary have to say. So I think that's going to be a further useful information as well. So I'm very satisfied with the way we are dealing with this matter. I'm very satisfied with the timeframes we're putting in place. And I'm looking forward to next week when we can get this document signed off and get it out in the public domain, because that is where it should be, because people want to talk about this and they want to give their views and they want us to get about it in a timely way. So I would encourage you to just vote for the motion so we can get on with it. Right, other speakers? Councillor O'Leary?
Yeah, thank you. I'm supporting the motion. I do want to get on with it, but we did make this decision for this discussion document on the 31st of March. I wasn't able to attend the briefing, and while I appreciate the constraints that I am hearing from staff around the draft reflecting what elected members have, what the collective have, feedback they've given, the first time that I've seen this was 5 p.m. last night. So I do have a view and I do have an opinion on it, and this could result in a $50 million plus decision that this council or the incoming council will have to make. So it is important to get it right, and all due respect to the design and the information and everything else, but I do have some comments and I have shared them, and I stand by those comments. I do think that price tags need to be out there in bold. It does need to be blunt about the rates impact. It does need to be blunt about the debts impact. People need, people don't read everything in these documents. They won't read the fine print. There could be an image in there. I don't accept that it's too late to change the design, but given we've only got tomorrow and Monday, these councillors are going to have to probably meet tomorrow because the S&P meeting's on Tuesday. I don't like being the last cab off the rank. I don't think it's good governance, but I don't want to hold up the process. We do need to get on with this. The community, as Your Worship, as you've commented, the community are highly interested in this, and I really want to hear their views. And I apologise for not being able to be at that briefing, but I needed to share my views today. If you want to engage people, you have to be engaging. And so more often than not, we aren't engaging and we don't get it right. So be interested to see what we end up with the end of tomorrow, I guess.
All right, thank you. Councillor King, I had you.
Yeah, facts before decisions. We need to wait for the seismic report. We just don't know what we're up against. We're spending $116,000 of ratepayer money going to consultation when we don't actually know ourselves what we're consulting on because we don't know the condition of the building. Beware, councillors, you're in a frenzy to spend ratepayers' money without the information to make an informed decision.
Now, Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I support the amendment. And what we're talking about here is a possible option one whereby we refurbish the existing theatre at and I take this with a grain of salt, but that's the best effort, $20 million cost versus a new build at $50 million. So we're talking $30 million, and an awful lot of whether or not option one is available to us is predicated on whether or not the seismic report comes out satisfactory or otherwise. And I think it is very, very wrong for us to go out to the public without that information, because we might find that the seismic report comes in fine, and in actual fact, the $20 million option is the obvious logical one that saves the ratepayers another $30 million. If we start going out to the public now with options of a new build, you will create a level of expectation which will, like a bushfire, run away on you. And I've seen this happen with stadiums, rugby stadiums, event centres that we've done in this city before, where people were given prices for what things were going to cost, and the escalation on those things has been horrendous. And the ratepayers are still paying the cost for those. So I think we need to be very, very careful. We have our figures right. We know the quality of the building that the quality of the building that we're looking at, the existing building, because that will have a huge impact on whether or not we go to option one or option two. And the difference is, at the moment, based on the staff estimates, $30 million. And I would suggest it's probably going to get higher as we go closer.
Councillor Pascoe.
Yes, thank you. I'm supporting the motion. I think at last month's council meeting, the majority of councillors agreed that a decision around Founders Theatre should be largely concluded within this council term. I agree it's a major study, and the likely costs of option two becomes the preferred outcome, suggest here a minimum of $50 million. I think if you listen to some of the local building professionals, that $50 million could easily double to $100 million. While I have some sympathy to Councillor King's halt on pursuing options at this stage, I really believe this council is well equipped to multitask and to undertake consultation while the other work is being pursued.
Okay, thank you. Any other speakers for or against?
Yeah, point of clarity,
Yes.
point of order if you like. When did council agree to that a decision should be made this term?
I think by the resolution that was made. So if that's a point of order, and I
Yeah, it
guess,
is a point of order.
I guess the point of order is on factual accuracy. Well,
Yeah.
if I got that right?
Yep.
Um,
I want to know when did this council agree, this is the words, when did this council agree to a decision, that a decision should be made this term?
The resolution from the 31st of March said that staff were to bring back options for final decision, reading the exact wording, you might have it there, Sean, by 30th of June.
Decision on what happens to the founders is the way that I took what was said? Not a decision on consultation.
If I could just repeat my wording
Okay,
again.
So no, just before I finish, so sorry, councillor King, I misinterpreted
The
what you were
context of
saying.
what was said.
Just let me finish. I misinterpreted what you were saying about accuracy of information. So what was your point of order again? No, just I mean, I'm satisfied that you're raising factual inaccuracy, but what exactly was it?
The member said, and I took the context was, it's around the future of the founders, what we were going to do with it, and it was when did this, so it was, I'm asking, when did this council agree to a decision, that a decision should be made this term, during this term?
Right, and you're interpreting that as the public engagement or the decision about
The
founders?
decision on what's happening with the founders
Right.
is the
Okay.
context of what.
All right. So councillor Pascoe, do you just want to
Yeah.
clarify what you
Yeah,
said?
my wording was, and I took this from the March 31st meeting,
Right.
was that a decision was made by the majority of councillors agreed that a decision around the founders should be largely concluded within this council term.
And you took that from what?
From the discussion and the resolution, we actually set a timetable so that we would be in a position to make some recommendations so that the new council would not necessarily start from stage one.
Right.
Where's this timetable?
Well,
Where
the
is it?
timetable was around getting a report back by the 31st of June. I don't have the resolution in front of me, but it was around setting a timeline now, a timeline at that meeting, so that we would be in a position to make some recommendations that would allow the new council to finalise what our recommendations may have been.
Okay, so councillor King, I don't think the statement was inaccurate, because if you look at the resolution from the 31 March meeting, which is on page 14 of this report, it does say there that staff would report back on the detailed size and a recommendation to address the founders' theatres issue. So I think what councillor Pascoe said fits within that resolution. Now I've got councillor McPherson. Did I see your hand up?
Yes, thanks, Your
Okay.
Worship.
Thanks.
Look, I actually support both the amendment and the resolution, and I partly because I think it's important that we do get the seismic information as soon as possible, and we definitely shouldn't be making any final decisions until we get that. But also because I believe that that's going to come in a timely enough fashion to inform our decision making in a couple of months' time from the information I've received. So satisfied with that. I'm, like has been expressed, I think the content of this needs beefing up, more clarity, more distinction between the elements. Like Councillor O'Leary, I don't see any issues at all with this, A, remaining at 4 pages, B, having more pictorial representations in it, and C, being clearer and still within the same sort of size. I think it's just a typographical exercise which can easily be done, and happy to argue the toss with anyone that says otherwise on that front. I'm also unlike Councillor King, not so worried about whether the decision is made this term or not. I think the actions of this council at the start of its term showed that it was quite easily able to overturn the decision of a previous council. I'm talking about Waiwhakariki there at that point. So I don't think we're going to be so deep into the final decision making in a new council here to be able to not change course if that proved the best thing to do as far as the new council is concerned. We're not going to be turning the first sod before the elections, I'm quite certain of that. So while it's ideally you shouldn't try and sort of spend the money for an incoming council, I don't actually think that we're going to be doing that in reality anyway. The reason that I initially put up an amendment and agreed to a sort of a compromise position on the timing was simply that I thought it was far too rushed. It painted us into a corner, a bit like what Councillor King was talking about before. There wasn't that sort of need for a rush. I think 4 weeks minimum consultation is fine, but it's too little if you can take more. The ideal is certainly more than the minimum. You shouldn't equate the two together, and I think this gives us probably 6 weeks consultation, all things being equal, but certainly doesn't force us, if we don't like it, to make a decision next week. And that's important to give us a bit more of a measured look at the timeline. So that's why at the end of the day, I will support the amendment, but if that fails, I will support the motion.
Right. Councillor Gallagher?
Yes, I certainly do like the idea of the council assistant, and all three councillors' support for the performing arts and young people in this city is beyond question, and I think they're ideally placed to sit on that group. Like Councillor McPherson, I will support the amendment because I would rather have a tangible answer in terms of exactly the situation with the Founders Theatre to be an integral part of the public consultation process, and I think that's responsible governance. Let me be crystal clear. Hamilton cannot do without a performing arts centre in the area that the Founders Theatre fits, be that a Founders Theatre refurb or down the track a new version of the Founders Theatre. So let's be crystal clear on that. I'm certainly going to look to the Arts Forum, particularly to play a very key advisory role through this consultation process to this council. They are going to be earning the money that they don't earn to sit on that body, obviously, but that we are very lucky to have them. And I'm very wanting to sort of explore that whole issue around the funding. You know, lots of talk is about it's easy to get external funding from a declining lotteries grant process for a new as against a refurb, etc. So I think there's lots of things where, as an elected member, I want to lean very heavily, and the Arts Forum plays a very critical role. As I think the only local authority that gives any funding, and correct me if I'm wrong, to Arts Waikato, Creative Waikato, they'll play a very, very important role as well, and I'm delighted and agree that they are actually going to be facilitating some of the focus groups. I'll certainly be looking to them to have a very clear and concise view around regional funding. They are Creative Waikato, so they'll be engaging obviously with elected members from Waipa and Waikato Regional Council in terms of, I see they play a critical role because they have a regional role, and they've done a heck of a lot of work around the report that I read and all that, and I think they're going to really bring ballast, if you like, if I can use that, to this exercise. So I think we're really lucky to have those two groups. I have to say that I am a sceptic of the financial sums that have so far been put up, and history teaches me, lots of history teaches me, that sometimes calculations can not be as accurate as we would have liked them, particularly when it comes possibly to the new build, and I think we have to be honest about that. If the amendment is not successful, I'll be supporting the substantive motion, and I just want to implore the three excellent elected members, please could you just highlight in bold the seismic stuff, all right? And I'd love a highlight in bold around getting the city and the surrounding areas to think about a broad range of funding mechanisms, because as I said, and I will say it again, It is not fair that someone who owns a $500,000 or $400,000 home in Dinsdale or Frankton gets to pay, and someone who literally owns a multi-million-dollar residence in Tamahiri does not. That is not fair, that is wrong, and I certainly want to actually move ahead with creating a regional facilities, and this is a good example of what should be a regional fund. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher, can I just check that you're clear about amendment and motion? Because you talked as though you were supporting the motion, but then said you were supporting the amendment.
What I've indicated, that I'll be supporting the amendment, and don't misinterpret that as per we wait for the seismic report.
Right. Okay.
What I've indicated, if that amendment hypothetically is not successful,
Okay.
I will then be supporting still the original.
Okay, no, as long as I was clear on that, because I wondered if you were confused. All right, are there any other speakers? No? Okay, so we're going to vote on the amendment first, and hopefully the board works. So there's the amendment down the bottom. Okay.
The amendment has been lost, 4 votes to 7.
Okay, so we're now voting on the motion.
Jump the gun, Gary. Relax.
Okay, thank you.
Amendment carried, 9 votes to 2.
All right, thank you very much. So it's now time for afternoon tea. So we're going to move into public excluded after afternoon tea for 15 minutes or thereabouts. So I'm going to move that now so that people are clear about that. People, are we listening? So I'll move that we go into public excluded. Seconded by Councillor Gallagher. Right, all those in favour? Any against? Carried. Thanks.
What time are we back?
Sort of say it's never been
So we'll take 10 minutes for a cup of tea,
closed because it's never.
and then we'll have maximum 15 minutes.
Closed after independent report review.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.